she slid a laminated sheet of paper across the kitchen counter toward me like I was signing a lease. The first time I tried to hold my own grandson. I still remember standing in the doorway of their house in Pittsburgh, a stuffed bear tucked under my arm, and my daughter Kara just standing there with that tight little smile, waiting for me to read it. No unannounced visits, no bringing food without prior approval, no discussing family finances, no taking Liam anywhere without written consent, 48 hours in advance. I read it twice, then I looked up at her. She said, "Just so we're on the same page, Dad." My son-in-law Philip was somewhere behind her, near the back of the kitchen looking at the floor. That was 3 years ago. Liam was 3 then. The bear I brought him that day is probably in a donation box somewhere. I never did see him play with it. My name is Gerald Marsh. I'm 67 years old. I spent 33 years working as a civil engineer for the city of Pittsburgh, and I retired the year my wife Beverly got sick. Beverly passed 3 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. She was the kind of woman who remembered every birthday in the extended family, who kept a handwritten recipe box going back to her own mother, who once drove 90 minutes in a January snowstorm to bring soup to a neighbor she barely knew. She loved Kara fiercely and unconditionally. She adored Liam from the moment she first held him, just 2 weeks before her diagnosis. She used to say Liam was the universe's way of giving her something beautiful to look at on the way out. After Beverly died, I thought the hardest part would be the silence in the house. I was wrong. The hardest part was watching the family I thought I had get slowly managed away from me. One laminated rule at a time. It started before Beverly even passed. Kara and Philip had been married for 5 years at that point, and things had always been a little stiff between Kara and me. I put it down to personality differences. She was organized, particular, private. I respected that. I gave them space. I never dropped by unannounced, never offered opinions on their choices, never interfered. When they bought their house over in Mount Lebanon, a 4-bedroom on a quiet street, I gave them $60,000. That was the bulk of what remained from a small inheritance. My father had left me. I didn't attach conditions to it. I didn't ask for anything back. It was family money and they were family. What I didn't know was that in Kara's mind, $60,000 wasn't a gift, it was a transaction. And somewhere along the way, she had assigned me a value, calculated what I was worth to her household, and was quietly running the numbers. After Beverly died, I tried to stay present without being intrusive. I called ahead. I kept visits to once a week, Sunday afternoons, 2 or 3 hours. I'd bring Liam something small, a book, a puzzle, a candy bar from the shop near my house in Bethel Park. It felt like the most natural thing in the world, watching him grow. He had Beverly's eyes, that serious gray-blue that turned greener in the summer. And he asked questions constantly, the way kids do when they're figuring out that the world is enormous and nobody has explained any of it yet. But every few months something shifted. The Sunday visits got shorter. A 48-hour notice requirement got added. Then I was asked not to park in the driveway because it bothered the neighbors. Then I was told not to bring food anymore because Liam had dietary sensitivities I wasn't qualified to navigate. Then one Sunday I drove 45 minutes and Kara met me at the door and said it wasn't a good time. Liam was tired. I stood on that porch for 4 minutes and then drove home. I mentioned it to Philip the next time we talked. He said, "She just wants things to run smoothly. You know how she is." I did know how she was. What I was beginning to understand was that Philip had stopped being able to tell the difference between what Kara wanted and what was actually right. The formal document showed up in my email about 8 months after Beverly passed. It was printed on actual letterhead. Kara had drafted it herself, outlining the terms of my involvement in Liam's life. Saturday afternoons only, 2-hour maximum. Gifts required pre-approval. No photographs shared on social media without written consent. No overnight visits without 30 days notice minimum. At the bottom, there was a line I was supposed to sign. I didn't sign it. I called Kara and asked if we could meet in person. She said she'd been meaning to call too. We met at a diner in Carnegie halfway between our houses, neutral ground, which tells you everything about where things had gone. She sat across from me with the look of a woman who had rehearsed exactly what she was going to say. She talked for a while about structure, about how the visits were stressful for Liam. That puzzled me, since Liam always ran to the door when I arrived. But I let her finish. Then she got to the real point. If I wanted to maintain regular access to Liam, she felt it was reasonable for me to contribute to his expenses, not when I felt like it. A standing monthly transfer of $800 directly to an account she controlled, as a condition of continued access to my grandson. She called it a family support arrangement. I looked at my coffee. I looked at my daughter. She was 38 years old, sitting across a diner table in Carnegie, Pennsylvania, explaining to her father that seeing his grandchild would now cost $800 a month. I said I needed some time to think. She nodded like that was a perfectly reasonable response to a perfectly reasonable request. I drove home in the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. It's the quiet of a man who is trying very hard not to say something he can't take back. I didn't sleep well that night. I sat at the kitchen table where Beverly and I used to have our morning coffee, the same 2 chairs, the same window looking out at the backyard feeder. I thought about Liam's gray-blue eyes and the way he said Grandpa Gerald with the emphasis on the Gerald, like my name was the most interesting word he knew. I thought about Beverly holding him in that hospital room 2 weeks before they told us about the cancer. I thought about $60,000 going into a house that now had a sign-in sheet for family visits. And then I thought about a conversation I'd had a few months back with my neighbor Nadine, whose son had gone through a rough divorce. She'd mentioned a lawyer, a family law attorney in Pittsburgh named Harvey Caldwell. Patient precise, not the kind of man who gets loud when things get complicated. She'd given me his card and I'd taken it to be polite. It was still in the kitchen drawer with the takeout menus and the spare keys. I took it out that night. I called Harvey Caldwell the next morning. His assistant put me through within the hour. I spent 45 minutes on the phone explaining the situation as clearly and calmly as I could. Harvey listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Mr. Marsh, before we talk again, I need you to do a few things. Save every email, every text, every document Kara has sent you. Write down every visit that was canceled or restricted, with dates. And I'd like you to call your accountant about the $60,000. I asked him why the accountant. Because money given to family members isn't always treated the same way under family law, depending on how it was given and documented. I want to understand the full financial picture between you and your daughter's household before we decide how to proceed." I had used the same accountant for 22 years, Gloria O.B. She was meticulous, kept files the way a librarian keeps books, cross-referenced and permanent. I called her that same afternoon and explained what had happened. She pulled everything related to the $60,000 bank records, transfer histories, correspondence. What Gloria found was something I hadn't fully noticed at the time. The $60,000 I'd given Kara and Philip hadn't just gone toward the down payment on the Melt Lebanon house. Gloria showed me a chain of transfers I hadn't looked at closely before. About $22,000 had moved quietly from their joint account into a separate account in Kara's name alone. The account had been opened roughly 18 months after I'd given them the funds. The transfers were small enough to avoid easy notice, spread out over about 14 months. I sat in Gloria's office for a long time after she told me that. I thought about Philip's face at the diner the week before. That careful, coached expression. I wondered how much of what Kara had been telling me was her own thinking, and how much of it was a script she had written and handed to him. I wondered if he even knew about the account. I decided, sitting there, that he probably didn't. That made it worse somehow, not better. Then a few days later, a text came in from Philip's number. Short. He'd clearly typed it fast. "Gerald, I'm sorry, I didn't know she was doing any of this. She's been planning it a lot longer than you think. I found some things. I can't talk right now, but I needed you to know. I'm sorry." I read it 3 times. Then, I saved it with everything else. Harvey and Gloria worked together over the following 6 weeks. I didn't say a word to Kara.
I kept calling ahead for Saturday visits, kept following every rule on that laminated sheet, kept arriving on time with my car parked on the street.
Kara let me in for my 2-hour windows, and I sat on their living room couch and watched Liam work through puzzles on the floor and told him about the birds at the feeder in my backyard. There was a pair of cardinals that had been coming every morning that winter, and Liam loved hearing about them. He'd ask the same questions every visit. Were they the same 2 birds? Did they have names? Did they come back because they remembered me? I told him yes to all 3. I'm not sure about the first 2, but the third one I believe. One Saturday in the 5th week, Liam finished his puzzle, walked over to the couch, and climbed up next to me without saying anything. He leaned against my arm and looked out the window. We sat like that for a while, not talking. Kara was in the kitchen. I could hear her moving around in there. He looked up at me after a while and said, "Do you miss Grandma Beverly?" I said I did. Every single day, he nodded like that made sense to him. Then he said, "Me too." I don't really remember her, but I miss her anyway. I didn't say anything back for a moment. I just put my arm around him. That's a good kind of missing, I told him. It means she got to you even in the short time she had. He thought about that and then slid off the couch and went back to his puzzle box to find a harder one. 6 years old and already knew when a conversation was finished. I didn't let anything show on my face the whole time I was in that house. But I drove home that afternoon knowing exactly why I was doing what I was doing, and I didn't have a single doubt about it. In the 7th week, Harvey called me and said we had enough. He had drafted a legal demand letter. It outlined the $60,000 I had given Kara and Philip, now treated under the circumstances as a documented loan, given the way the funds had been redirected after the fact. The letter requested full repayment. It also formally asserted my rights as a grandparent under Pennsylvania family law, which does allow grandparents to petition the court for visitation when access is being unreasonably withheld. Gloria had prepared a financial summary to go alongside it, every transfer, every date, the account in Kara's name, the amounts. A clean, documented picture of exactly what had happened to $22,000 of money I had given to my daughter's family. Harvey went over both documents with me on the phone. He was careful to explain that the letter was not inflammatory. It did not accuse. It simply stated the facts, laid out the figures, and made very clear what my position was. That was the point. When you have the documentation, you don't need to raise your voice. I put both documents in a large brown envelope and sealed it. I called that Saturday morning and asked if I could come by as usual. Kara said yes, that was fine. I drove to Mount Lebanon with the envelope on the passenger seat. I had not told anyone I was bringing it. I had not rehearsed anything. I just drove. Philip answered the door. He was still in a sweatshirt, looked like he hadn't had his coffee yet. He saw the envelope in my hand and something shifted in his face. Not surprise exactly. More like a man who has been waiting for something to happen and is relieved it's finally happening, even if he doesn't know what it is yet. I said I had something he needed to see. He stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door mostly closed behind him. I handed him the envelope. He opened it right there, standing in the cold with his breath fogging up in front of him. He read the first page of Harvey's letter slowly. I watched the color change in his face. He flipped to the second page, then to Gloria's financial summary. He stood there for a while, just looking at the numbers. Then he looked up at me. "Gerald," he said, "what is this?" "It's a letter from my attorney," I said, "and a financial report from my accountant. I think you'll want to read both of them carefully, and then I think you'll want to have a conversation with Kara." He looked back down at the papers. I could see him working through the numbers on Gloria's summary, matching them to dates he probably recognized. The joint account, the transfers, the timeline. "I didn't know about this account," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "I know," I said. He was quiet for another moment. Behind the door I could hear Liam somewhere inside, talking to himself the way he does when he's playing with his building blocks. That low-running commentary he keeps up, like he's narrating his own show. Philip looked at me. "How long have you been sitting on this?" 7 weeks, I said. He let out a long breath. The door opened then, and Kara appeared. She had heard us on the porch. She looked at Philip holding the papers, looked at the envelope, looked at me. Her expression shifted through a few things in about 2 seconds. Confusion first, then recognition, then something that was trying to become composure and wasn't quite getting there. "What is that?" she said. Philip handed her the financial summary without saying anything. She took it. "Read the first few lines." I watched her jaw tighten. "I don't know what he's told you," she started. "Kara," I said, and I kept my voice low and even. "The account is documented. The transfers are documented. The dates, the amounts, all of it." She looked up from the paper. "This isn't an attack," I said. "I'm not here to make a scene. I'm here because Philip deserves to know what has been happening, and because I deserve to see my grandson without paying for the privilege." She started to say something about household management, about saving for Liam's future, about how the money had been intended to help the family, and that's exactly what it was doing. The explanation was smooth, like she had thought about it before. But the numbers on Gloria's summary are not the kind of thing a smooth explanation gets around. At a certain point, the words just ran out, and she went quiet. Philip was looking at her in a way I had not seen him look at her before. Not angry, just tired. The look of a man who has just been handed the explanation for something that had not made sense for a long time. Liam appeared then, pushing the door open and ducking under Philip's arm the way kids do when they want to know what the adults are doing. He looked up at me and his whole face changed. "Grandpa Gerald." "Hey, buddy," I said. He reached up and I took his hand, and for a moment the three of us, Philip, Kara, and me, were all just standing there on that porch in the cold, and nobody said anything. Then Philip looked at me over Liam's head. His expression was something I don't have a clean word for. Embarrassed and relieved, and something that might have been gratitude all at the same time. The face of a man who had just been given permission to stop pretending everything was fine. "Come inside, Gerald," he said. We sat at their kitchen table for close to 2 hours. Kara tried a few more times to reframe what the documents showed. But there is a point in every conversation where the facts have been laid out clearly enough that continuing to argue against them just makes things worse. And eventually she reached that point and stopped. There were a lot of conversations after that. Some I was part of. Many I wasn't. I'm not going to summarize Philip's marriage for him. That's his story to tell. What I can tell you is that 6 months later, Kara and Philip were separated. The house went to Philip after the mortgage got settled out. Kara moved back to her aunt's place in Canonsburg. The $18,000 that couldn't be fully traced through the account transfers was written off as a loss. Harvey advised me it wasn't worth pursuing further, and I agreed with him. Some things cost what they cost. You take the lesson and you move on. What changed was Saturday mornings. I started picking Liam up every Saturday at 8 o'clock. We'd drive out to Settlers Cabin Park, not far from my house in Bethel Park, and walk the trails down by the creek. Beverly used to love that park. She used to take Kara there when Kara was about Liam's age, back when the trails were still mostly gravel and the creek ran higher in the spring. I hadn't been back there much after Beverly passed. Going back with Liam felt like the right way to return to it. There's a spot along the lower trail where the herons like to stand in the shallows early in the morning. Big, still birds, gray-blue, patient, in a way that seems almost deliberate. The first time Liam saw one, he grabbed my sleeve and didn't say anything for a full 30 seconds, which is a long time for a 6-year-old to stay quiet. He whispered, "What is that?" I started to say great blue heron, and then for some reason I just said, "That's a big gray bird." He accepted that completely and has called them that ever since. Every Saturday, when we get to that spot on the trail, he slows down and starts scanning the water. "You think the big gray birds are here today?" And I tell him, "Let's go look." Beverly would have loved that. She had a thing about herons. Said they were proof that patience was its own kind of intelligence. I think about that on the trail sometimes, standing there with Liam watching the water. Philip and I have found our way to a decent place. He calls sometimes on Sunday evenings, nothing heavy, just checking in. He apologized to me properly about 6 weeks after the separation, sat across from me at the same diner in Carnegie, and said he was sorry he had let things go as far as they had. I told him I didn't think he'd had an easy position to be in. That was true. I meant it. Liam splits his time between the two houses now. He's adjusted the way kids do when the adults around them handle things decently. He still talks about his building blocks and the cardinals at my feeder and whether the big gray birds will be at the creek. He started first grade in September and came home the second week with a drawing he'd made at school of a bird standing in water with long legs. His teacher had written heron across the top in pencil. He showed it to me on Saturday morning and I put it on my refrigerator next to a photo of Beverly holding him in the hospital the week she died. The two of them looking at each other like they already knew everything they needed to know. She would have loved that drawing. She would have framed it and put it somewhere prominent and told everyone who came through the door about it. Last month, Liam lost his first tooth. He called me on the phone the moment it came out, while the gap was still bleeding a little. So proud he could barely get the words out in the right order. I drove over and took a photo of him grinning that big gap-toothed grin and sent it to Philip and kept one for myself. Put it in the frame on my kitchen windowsill next to the one of Beverly. She would have been completely over the moon about that tooth. She would have called everyone she knew. She would have made a whole production out of it. I like to think she heard him on the phone. If you are a father or a grandfather watching this and something in this story sounds familiar, I want to tell you a few things I had to learn the hard way. Grandparent rights are real. In Pennsylvania and most other states, grandparents can go to court for visitation when access is being unreasonably withheld. I did not know that before I called Harvey. You might not know it either. Now you do. When you give money to family, document it, not because you don't trust them, because documentation protects everyone, including you, if the relationship changes down the road. A simple letter stating the amount, the purpose, and whether it's a gift or a loan can make all the difference later. I learned that the expensive way. And if you're watching someone in your family get pushed out, a father being kept at arm's length, a grandfather following a laminated list of rules just to sit on a couch for 2 hours, say something. Not in a way that makes a bigger mess, but say something. The person on the inside usually cannot see it clearly. They are too busy trying to follow the rules and keep the peace and not make things worse. Sometimes the most useful thing another person can do is name what they are looking at. I'm not a confrontational man. I spent 33 years calculating load-bearing structures and making sure things that needed to hold would hold. I don't rush, I don't escalate unless I have to. But there is a difference between keeping the peace and accepting terms that were never fair to begin with.